There are just a few books that totally changed the way we work in the last 10 years. Let me put it in this way. And two of these are co-written by the same author. One is The Challenger Sale, as everyone knows. The other one is The Challenger Customer. But I'm so happy to have today Brent Adamson, the co-author of these two books, and to avoid to talk about these books for the whole episode.
Tobia, how are you, man? It's good to be with you. There's lots to talk. We could talk about the books. We could talk about anything but the books. Whatever you want to do, man. I am yours. Let's go.
That's a good one. So, no, but thanks for being here. And just for the few of, let's say, the few listeners who don't know you, I think that would be two, three of them. If you want to just briefly introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure. In fact, I run a keynote right now that starts with, "For those who don't know me," which I imagine is all of you. So the books are known. The schlub who wrote them probably less so, and that's totally fine. But so I have, Tobia. There's a longer story back in my, because I'm old. I've got a couple careers in my under my belt. The first one was as an academic and a linguist and a German professor, but that's a long time ago. But for the last 20 years, I have been in the business of researching and trying to understand as best as I possibly can, working with some really world class research teams. What does what does what does great B2B selling, and for that matter B2B marketing, look like? And particularly in the last couple of years, last about 5 or 6 years, that work is revolved around B2B, not so much B2B selling as much as we say that, or I say that's what I study. It's been around B2B buying and how B2B buying is actually evolving pretty rapidly. But all of that work has occurred. It originally started in 2003 at a company called Corporate Executive Board, or CEB. For those who may remember, it was just an incredible organization that was. And then we were bought by a company called Gartner, I guess about 5 or 6 years ago. And I was at Gartner for probably total about 5 years. And then last year I left Gartner and joined a company called Ecosystems, which is in the space of value management. And we can park that and talk about that separately if you want. That's a whole nother podcast. But that's who I am. Or as I like to say, I'm just a schlub from Omaha, Nebraska, which is in the middle of the United States. No one's ever heard of it, except for the fact that that's where Warren Buffett is from. Used to live down the street from me. Not because I grew up in a rich palatial neighborhood, but because Warren Buffett, like all good Nebraskans, is just a normal, humble dude. So there you go, man. That's it in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, your story. No, but by the way, like, I think everyone in the audience knows you. And the reason why I reached out and the reason why I'm happy you're here is because you're doing such an impressive job, like really on the teaching side of selling with your small videos that you provide, like let's say every week and so on. And every time I watch them, I have 6, 8 minutes of pure knowledge. It just breaks my mind, and then I have to figure out how to apply the day after. And honestly, how that idea came up, and let me just give you little bit of background on why I'm asking this question is because there is a lot of no sense on LinkedIn in the last 3 years. No one is giving practical advices. And what made you choose to do this, to provide all that value, all that knowledge when no one else is doing it?
Well, first of all, thank you. So the videos you're referring to it's a video series I do on a weekly basis. It's called Brent's Breakdown, which my colleague at Ecosystems named. She had no idea how close she got to the mark with the name, but that's a different story. But um, so it's just once a week I turn on the camera. Actually, I turned on the camera 2 days ago and did 3 weeks in a row. So there'll be three of them just coming. One just came out this morning, in fact. But um, of just little tidbits, little ideas, little bits of research, little insights, ideas that I've taken and and put together across, again, 20 years of doing this. And actually, what's really fun is I've dipped into the things I learned prior to that, my old days of teaching and as a professor as well. So it's just kind of I don't know, Tobia, when you get to be my age, which is really really old, you kind of are you've begun, and people told me this was going to happen, and sure enough, here we are. You begin to become driven more by a desire, a need to want to give back, to share with the world, to kind of leave a mark, say, hey, I was here. Here's what I learned. If this is valuable to you, I hope it is. There's also an ulterior motive, which is all of this comes out under the brand of Ecosystems, the company I work with now. And so there's just a chance to associate that brand with my brand and put them all together and get people interested in what we're doing over at Eco, which is super cool stuff. So there's that too. But literally, I'll show you, because I'm sitting at my desk in my home in Virginia in the United States. And this right here is just this that stack of little post-it notes is ideas for future episodes of Brent's Breakdown. So I it's almost like a fishbowl. Like, every couple of weeks I turn on the camera, I reach over here, grab a piece of paper, say, "No, that's a good one. Let's go." And then then I do the videos, by the way, they're getting longer and longer. So I had to dial it back. So the one that came out this morning is 10 minutes long, and nobody's got the patience for that. So I've gone back to, I'm shooting for 3 to 4 to 5 minutes each. But the one that came out today is what in the world is value management? And that one was a bit longer, but there you go. But it's cool that you like them. I'm the other thing I tell you real quick is because, of course, Matt Dixon, I think maybe he's been on your show. If it's not, he should be. He co-wrote Challenger Sale with me and Challenger Customer, and we did a lot of research together. Matt's got a new book out called The Jolt Effect, which is fabulous work. And I wasn't part of that project. I've done a lot of work that's adjacent to it or relevant to it, but at Gartner, but we worked independently on that work. And he kind of went his direction. I went mine, practical reasons. But anyway, as a result of that, people are asking me, so Brent, when is your next book coming out? And the answer is, I don't know. Because the thing is, I'm not completely sure either that I want to write another book or that I should, because I just don't know if a book in today's world and the way information works is the best way to get information out in the world in a way that's consumable, that is scalable, that is shareable. So I'm kind of digging this whole idea of little bite-sized chunks of insight delivered on video that people can share quickly and are modular. So so this is like, I guess, at least in my experiment to see, maybe I'll do this instead of a book. That's a long answer. Sorry, man, but this is what happens when you talk to me.
That's a good one. This is why I'm happy that you talk a lot, and yeah, like I really love that idea because every time I watch an episode, that is something I forgot to do on my client with my clients. Like
Yeah.
that's a shame on me, but it works as a reminder for me. And in the last few weeks, I think that one video really triggered me. Like you
Hmm.
really put like the alert on, and that's that became worried about what to do this year because, by the way, for the audience, Brent recorded like an episode called "Driving Growth with the Existing Customers," where he actually talks about the complexity of turning to the actual customers right now in this age where we really think that because of the inflation and everything that is going on, we won't have all that new logo opportunities on our pipeline. And I really want to focus on one thing really kind of worried me when you were the only one by talking about underappreciation.
Mm.
When you talk about customers which are kind of underappreciated because we think that by turning to these existing customers we have an easy life to sell them something. So my first question for you is, if you want, please elaborate a little bit better as I've done, but where do you think this underappreciation comes from?
Yeah. Okay. And if the least way I think of the underappreciation is we've underappreciated just how hard this is, right? So the there's a tendency, as you mentioned, Tobia, that as we get into potentially some bumpy economic waters, and even just more broadly speaking, in general, irrespective of the economy, most CEOs, most heads of sales will push really hard for driving growth with existing customers. And the whole idea is that the CAC, that is the cost of customer acquisition, is much lower because effectively we've already acquired them. They're already a customer. They've already looked us in the eye and effectively said, we like what you do. We find value in it. We want to do business with you. So the belief, which is totally natural and I think logical, is to say, well, they're already a customer. How hard could it possibly be to get them to do even more with us going forward, particularly relative to going out and getting a new logo altogether, a company that's never done business with us in the past? And the point of that particular breakdown video was not to say that that's wrong, that it's easier to hunt than it is to farm. I think that's not probably true, and the CAC probably is a little bit lower, but I guess it's simply to say, let's not just assume that because they're a customer already, that somehow it's going to be easy to get them to do even more with us going forward. That is actually, it's not to say that we shouldn't do it or that it's harder than hunting, but it's just harder than we think. That is, and because, and the reason why I think we have this, we tend to go there and think, well, how hard could it be? It's because we fail to fully appreciate as I like to call it, the physics of driving growth with an existing customer. So, what needs to happen inside the customer organization for that growth to happen versus driving a renewal or a retention conversation. We think with existing customers. Well, I can stop there but I think that's the thing that we have to think about with existing customers is really I'm trying to do two things simultaneously. I'm trying to retain them, so it's a retention conversation, but I'm also simultaneously trying to grow them, and those two things are actually they operate very differently from each other.
And so my follow-up question is, why do you think we think that we can achieve this easily? Just because they're in our patch, just because we give them for granted, like why do we think so?
Well, to be try to be fair to all of us, right? I mean, there's probably some real truth to it, which is we already know who they are. We have relationships with them. We can more easily see what they're doing with us, so we can track their activity in our CRM system or in our sales technology. We have relationships built. We have access. Hopefully, if we haven't completely screwed things up, they will actually answer our emails and our phone calls. And so all those things on the hunting side, which seems so hard, like I think you'd agree on the hunting side, the hardest thing about selling is just freaking getting access in the first place. How do I even get them to take my call, to pick up the Zoom or answer that spam email that I just sent them? And the answer is you can't, right? So at least it's the bar is so low in sales. This is like if we look at our existing customers, say, well, at least I'll take my phone call. And we assume that's and to be fair, like that is a big deal because no one else will. But then what do we do with that call once we have it? That's where I think things start to go off the rails and pretty quickly.
And I think that this is a nightmare for this year, because every one of us will turn to existing customer, maybe the customers that we didn't care about in the last, let's say, years of 2 years and so, and we'll start to ask something. You know what I mean? Because we
Mhm.
will be so
Mm.
needy of new opportunities that we will start asking kind of everything to them. And going back to
Mm.
the mm, retention topic you said, and I really appreciated when during the video you talked about retention plus growth equals more revenues, and this is something I really want to go back on these 2 points, because as you said, they move into different, let's say, even kind of behaviors that we have to adopt with someone we talk
Mhm.
to. So pretty broad question, but what kind of actions, what kind of behaviors we can act to be really successful on both sides of the equation by reducing the volume of activities we do, so in that way we increase, let's say, the quality of what we do.
Yeah. It's a great question, and this is where I think it becomes really important to understand the difference between a retention conversation and a growth conversation. As I mentioned earlier, the physics of these two things are different. It's like, what the heck does that mean? So let's dig into that. By the way, there's one additional thought. I talked about, well, you already have access, you have information, you can track activities. But the other thing I would hope that you have with an existing customer is trust, right? And we know, and we talk so much in sales about the word trust, and it becomes almost like this empty vessel. Everything becomes about trust, so you get lots of false positives. But hopefully, you've built some trust as well. But all right, so now let's take that as our starting point. So let's take a retention conversation. So you've got a customer, maybe you're in a recurring revenue model and it's on a monthly basis. They have to make that decision to stay with you, or maybe it's a long-term contract every 3 years. But one way or another, there's this conversation you need to have with an existing customer about whether or not they're going to stick around and continue to do business with you going forward. And so that would be in a recurring revenue model, that would be a renewal conversation, which is the world I've lived in for 20 years now. Um, and but think about it from your customer's perspective. So this is that moment of empathy, Tobio, where I ask everyone to take their selling hat off for a minute and put their customer hat on, and think about it from the perspective of a customer. And think about that conversation when you're asking me to continue that relationship going forward at the same level, with the same solution, with the same product, at the same level, with the same number of seats involved, or however it is that you go to market. For me as a customer, that, in a time of cost cutting and all that kind of stuff, that might be a hard conversation, because I have to think about, can I still keep doing that? But at the same time, it's a, relatively speaking, it's a pretty straightforward decision, because what I'm essentially deciding is, can I maintain status quo? And if the answer is yes, I want to keep doing this with you, all I'm really doing, and I say all, I mean, it's still a lot, but all I'm really doing is deciding to keep doing what I've already been doing already. Again, that is a decision for status quo. Um, and in a time of change, sometimes deciding to keep the status quo is, in fact, a little bit harder. But relatively speaking, that's a straightforward conversation, or at least decision for me, because I've already decided to do this thing in the past, right? I've already gotten the ducks in a row. I've already aligned the stakeholders. I've already implemented the thing. So this is just a decision for to keep on keeping on, as I like to say, right? So now, if we want to grow with that customer, if we want to do even more with that customer going forward, there's kind of at least three different ways I can grow with that customer. I can get those same group of buyers, that same decision group, to do even more. So you bought the product in the past, and I want you to buy the services that go with it. Or you bought the this part of the module, well, now I want you to buy the additional modules that go with it. So I'm asking the same group to do more. That's one way to do it. Or I'm asking a different group to do the same thing. So I asked North America to buy my solution, and they love it. So now I'm going to go to EMEA, to Europe and Middle East, and ask them to do it too. So it's the same solution, the same configuration, but now it's a different buying group. Or there's a third way, which is now or I might say, hey, I'm selling into Acme International, and they bought this much in North America. Now I'm going to try to sell that much globally. So now I'm asking a different group of people to do even more. But notice what's different, what's interesting about all three of those scenarios, Toby, and I'm sure we could come up with other versions, is that in any one of those scenarios, you're asking your customers not to make a decision for status quo. You're asking your customers to make a decision for change, either same group, different thing, different group, same thing, or different group, different thing, right? But one or another, you're asking your customers somehow to not say, to literally say, let's not keep on keeping on, let's do something different going forward. And the point of sort of the breakdown and a lot of the research that was inspired that inspired it at CEB at the time, way back when, was this is just different. Asking your customer to do something similar versus asking your customer to do something different are two different motions. The kinds of things you need to do to get them to engage in that decision, to agree to that decision, are actually different. And I want to take a breath and get your thoughts. But one quick thought on that, real briefly, is that what we found is, for a renewal decision or a retention decision, which again is a decision for status quo, not a decision for change, it turns out, say, for example, that something like satisfaction is really important. In other words, if I'm highly satisfied with you and your solution and our relationship and your execution and our implementation, like, wow, this thing's great, that is a huge driver of retention. Like, this is really, really working. I'm super, super happy. Let's keep going. But the second you ask me to do something more, to change different people, different scope, different geography, whatever it is, now all of a sudden, just the fact that I'm happy and satisfied with the way things were going in the past is no longer sufficient to get me to want to embrace change going forward. It's like, oh, I love you guys, we should change what we're doing, is not sufficient. That math doesn't work. Rather, it's, I love you guys, that's great, I'll keep doing that. But hold on, if we're going to do something different, we need to go back and kind of start from scratch and rethink the whole thing. And so, bottom line, what that told us and what we found again and again and again in our data and research at CEB was, satisfaction turns out to be a great driver of retention and a horrible predictor of growth for those underlying reasons. That's crazy, right?
That's crazy. But this brings me to a question now related to the SaaS word, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
most of the contracts have some price increases in it.
Right.
At the time
Yeah.
of renewal, the time goes up. So my question for you is, what is the price increase? Is it decision for status quo, or because of the price increase, is a decision for change?
Oh, that's a really great question. No one's, I don't, in all these years, I don't know if Toby, someone's asked me that exact question. All right. So, if that but so now we're in hot take land. This is no longer research based. This is just like Adamson's opinion, so it's worthless. But I'll give it to you anyway, since you asked. Um, to the degree that price change is sort of coming out of nowhere, that feels more like a change, right? In other words, Hey, by the way, we're super excited to keep working with you. Just to let you know, I've talked it over with my manager, and we're excited to work with you going forward. There will be a small increase of 3%. You can think of all the different ways you'll say it or package it or present it. But from your customer's perspective, like, think again, this is the moment of empathy. I don't think it's up to you or I to answer your question. I think it's up to your customer to answer that question, right? And if their reaction is, "Whoa, that's different," or "Whoa, I didn't see that coming," or "Wait, where is that coming?" or "What is this?" Notice all of those reactions are reactions of change. Like, this is different. However, if when appropriate, maybe that contract was started from the very beginning with a heads up, like, by the way, we expect over the course of a year that this contract will be adjusted for the price of inflation indexed to this number. On average, that number is about 3%. Um, or or if you don't want to talk about price per se, when we revisit this contract, we're going to look at these three dimensions of value and determine whether or not you're getting these kinds of outcomes based on the value drivers that we've identified up front, and we will peg the price of this solution going forward at any point to the amount of value that you're achieving. And so here's how that math works. Then all of a sudden that price increase is not new or out of nowhere or change. It's actually expected because the solution wasn't sold on a specific price point. The solution was sold on an equation of how price is determined. It was sold on a methodology for determining price, and it hasn't changed: the methodology for determining the price. So that's how I could take a price increase and make it not a change versus make it a change. I'm literally making this up as I go, but it seems to make sense to me as I say it out loud. I don't know. What do you think?
It does. It does. Yeah, I'm happy that it was not on the research. So we can say that we researched it now.
Boom. That's having a conversation is research.
But by the way, like I'm kind of happy for these answers because it seems to me that in both models, retention, growth, you really insist on, but even on these price increase, you really insist on these, a lot of communication that has to happen with the customer in order to establish trust. And I had on the show David Brock, the well-known author. I will have David Curlin, and they have both a similar view on the SDR function for the GTM space.
Yeah, they
They
do.
they have a pretty, let's say, tough idea, which I agree in uh, in a way, and this is why I'm really interviewing also Dave Curlin next month on this. But
Hmm.
the question I have for you is this new GTM motion, so let's call it SDR plus ISR or inside sales plus A, can this be a good driver, in your opinion, for maximizing both retention and customer growth? Or are we allocating the less experienced people to do the most difficult job?
Well, that would be Dave Brock's argument, right? And full disclosure, Dave's a good friend of mine, so he and I have I've heard him rant about this in the past. Rant is unfair, but I've heard him make this argument in the past, and so, like, his argument would be like the most important part of the deal probably is at the top of the funnel is sourcing and scoping that opportunity, particularly collaboratively with your customer. Why would you put your least experienced, least expensive people on that? Take your most expensive, or at least your most valuable, most talented person, and put them there instead. Um, what I think most sales leaders would tell you, and Dave knows this, by the way, but it's a bit of a provocative argument that he's trying to kind of poke the bear with, but most sales leaders would counterpoint, and he'd know this, would be, yeah, but I can't get scale with that, right? And see, that's the thing, that the challenge we all face in sales at all times, and in marketing for that matter, is how do we not just do something great, but how do we do something great at scale? And that's where we often get tripped up. So as soon as we see one SDR or BDR doing something really great, we think, oh, let's just hire 10 more of those, right? And so, but what happens is that sometimes where that BDR is the thing that they're doing that makes them exceptional is in fact the exception, not the rule. And then we go hire much more. Than what we do is we wind up actually reinforcing the rule of mediocrity rather than the exception of brilliance, right? And I think if you haven't had a chance to meet Howard Dover yet, you'll want to. Howard Dover is a professor of sales at the University of Texas at Dallas in the States, and Howard has a new book out called The Sales Innovation Paradox. And the sales innovation paradox simply is an argument about how come all of this great sales technology that was meant to make sales better has actually effectively made sales worse. That seems to be a bit of a paradox. And the underlying answer is because we took mediocre behavior and just used technology to scale the heck out of it. So now we have BDR teams and SDR teams sending really bad in-mails and just spamming the world with, if I may, crappy content and impersonal outreaches. And so I think particularly in the SaaS space, we've done more damage to the sales profession in the last 5 years by just pouring money from VCs into hiring to hire a whole bunch of people who, through no fault of their own, are being coached to engage in really crappy sales activities. And so now we all, like, I don't know about you, man. Do you answer your phone anymore? Do you answer any emails on LinkedIn? Do you delete the email that says just a minute of your time and I hope you're well in a second without even reading beyond that? I do, because it's all, not only is it all commoditized, it's all commoditized at a deeply mediocre level. And so now, does that all mean then, Tobia, that we should get rid of SDRs? I don't think the answer is necessarily yes. I think the answer is no. We should try and focus them on the kinds of activities that will actually be effective rather than the crappy stuff that they're doing now. And that's not their fault. What do you think? Do you buy that?
I buy that, and I have to also kind of go back to the idea of the technology that we use. And
Yeah.
I often work with SDRs, inside sales, because I've been one since like
Yeah.
3 4 4 years ago. And
It's a hard job.
it's a hard job, and I always said that the tool is okay, the tool is great, but you can learn it in 15 minutes. What is not, what is difficult to learn is the ability to interact with the person, write an appropriate email, and write an email that is clear, to the point, and drives action.
Yeah.
And this is something which goes, let me talk to Brent, to the teacher now. This is something that
Yeah.
goes back to school, you know what I mean? This
Hmm.
is something that you acquire from reading, from being interested in how copywriting works, or even reading a book about something else. It's a curiosity that goes way out of sales. And it seems to me that the more we use certain type of technologies, the less the younger generation are, willing to improve on the communication side of the thing, because we start giving the communication for granted. It's there.
Yeah.
We can use that tool to communicate. We can write that email. We can use that structure. We can use that cadence. And this is something that drives me crazy. So I think that, to answer your question, I totally agree. And I think that on the coaching side, we should really coach the young salespeople to just talk to another human being. It seems simple, but it's not nowadays.
Just as a quick aside, this is actually really funny, Tobia, is that so you just used the phrase "the younger generation" twice. So welcome to the dark side. You are now old. So let's just be very clear on that. You literally just used effectively the phrase "kids these days." So the next thing you're going to be doing, if you have a lawn in Italy, you're going to go out and tell these kids to get off your lawn, and you're just like, so welcome to the dark side. It just goes downhill from here as an old person. But so I just thought I'd share that with you. But so here actually, but listening to your comment, I instinctively want to agree with you. Curiosity being just human and creating a human connection. It's hard to argue with that, right? But it's also hard to actually do. And so to your point, partly it's like maybe we need to hire more liberal arts students, or people who read literature, people more curious, or just understand human interactions. I think some of that may be true. But again, I've got this challenge over here from head of sales, like, yeah, but how do I do that at scale? Which is that we could get into like fundamental questions of the education system and all that kind of stuff. We could get into really interesting questions about technology and whether technology is dehumanizing interpersonal relationships. But let me, if I could, take all that, because those are hard, big questions, right? We'll set them over here, and let me cut through it with one maybe simple idea, which is even excellence, when it's all the same, is no longer effective, is an interesting thing to think about. So in other words, what if I hired thousands and thousands of very curious, well-read, hungry, deeply curious, incredibly human SDRs, and I had them write world-class in-mails, emails, and outreaches that fit exactly the criteria that you're talking about. And now I did that at scale. I wonder, my mind tells me that over time, that is going to run its course too, not because it wasn't great, but because it wasn't different. Right. And that over, so it's, there's this thing that we've used in our research projects over and over and over again. It's called the Kano model. And I'll probably do a breakdown on this at some point. The Kano model, it's Kano. I don't think it's an acronym. I think it's actually the name of the person who came up with it. I'll have to dig into that a little bit more. But the Kano model is kind of, so let me give you an example how the Kano model works. Basically, it tells you that today's delighters are tomorrow's need to haves. And it happens in car construction all the time. So there was a time, and I'm old enough to remember when automatic anti-lock braking systems, or ABS, in the car was a big freaking deal. Like, this is like only the best cars had them. You had to go to Germany to get this stuff. And then over time, every car had it. Or the thing that's more recent that people can maybe relate to a little bit more is a backup camera. So, when you put the car in reverse, you want to back up and you have a little TV screen, you can see what's behind you. There wasn't that long ago, remember, that was like, what? That's crazy. And at least in the States, that is now required on all new cars. So that is a delighter becoming a common, becoming a need to have. And so where did I go with this? So the Kano model applied to what you're saying. So now I got all these liberal arts students who are deeply curious, great at human interaction, and writing world-class emails, but they're all doing it. So they're all excellent, but they're all the same. And I'm wondering if all of a sudden now that delighter has just become the backup camera on every car. So in other words, it'll work for a while, but over time it becomes commoditized, and therefore I ultimately tune it out because it's just the same. And I think that's the battle. This is what I've been watching over the last 20 years in my experience in sales, is that what sales really is about more than anything else, Tobia, is this constant battle to be different. It is a constant, I call this chasing differentiation. And it is a long story of like what used to allow us to stand out. Everyone realizes, wow, that actually is allowing you to stand out. I should do that too. And over time, you no longer stand out because everyone's doing it. So I got to find the next thing to stand out, and the next thing to stand out, and the next thing to stand out. So my advice to a BDR, SDR today I think it would be to be curious, be human, be connected, because that today is in fact different. But the reason why it works is not because it's human, connected, and curious. It's because it's different. And so I would say watch for the moment that stops being different, and then figure out what's the next different thing you can do. I don't know. What do you think of that? I'm literally making this up. These are hot takes you're getting today, but but I think it's a story of difference as much as a story of excellence.
It is, and I already suggested a few people. There is these Chat GPT emails going on, and I just told them, yes, let the other SDR use this Chat GPT. Everyone will come up with the same emails, and you just write your own, like, let's say templates, but you write them by yourself, and then you use them and you do something different. So I totally buy into this. It's more about being different, and it's especially for them, especially for these people that have a hard job. It's really showing the prospect, showing the person you want to talk to, that you are not taking a high volume approach with them, a commoditized approach. Even if you send an email which has some typo in it, even if you send an email which is a little bit too long compared to the 250 characters or so on, just do it, because probably it's different from what they expect. So I totally agree with you.
This is where I think it comes down to humanity and human beings. It's like, and this, you and I are largely in agreement, I think. So if it sounds like I'm debating a point, I'm not really. I'm just experimenting with it, right? Which is to say, it's your point, which is at the end of the day, the humanity is what shines through, and just making that human connection, which is a large part of your I don't know, argument or your position or your idea, which I agree with. But when I don't know if it comes with age or not, but the thing that I've learned in humanity is that the thing that people seem to want more than anything else is to be seen, is to just be acknowledged, to say, do you know who I am, or do you understand who I am as an individual? And the degree that we're sending out all this commoditized, anonymized, routinized communication, it does it does the exact opposite. I don't see you, I don't actually understand you, I don't connect to you. And what we all seem to crave, maybe this is just my own projection bias and I'm exposing too much of my own personality and my darkness, I don't know, but is we all just kind of want to connect. We want to, right? And so I think this way I come full circle back to your point about like just I think is what you were saying all along. And so what is it that so it's not just be different for the sake of being different. I'm like, wearing a clown suit and throwing pies and stuff like that's different and it's really a bad idea, right? So it's how so being different with let's take your idea and mine and put them together. How can I find different, unique, non-commoditized ways to make a deeper, better human connection? I think we just solved the world's problems, Tobia. What do you think?
I think that we made it, and I think that I don't think I will publish this episode for free now, Brent. You gave me this. I think I will charge someone and get the solution for the whole world's problem. But
This, by the way, this is the story of my life. I have spent an entire career making money for other people. So that is literally what I do. I said, like, people ask me, how much do you make on Challenger? The answer is actually nothing. And that's okay, because I knew that going forward. The book is owned by the company, the IP is owned by the company, the training is owned by the other company. So, but a lot of people say, I have made my entire career off of that work. It's like, thank you. I guess kind of I have to. Sharing the wealth, man.
It's your turn now. No, it's up to you. No, but by the way, we agree on that one, and this brings us back again to the video, and
Yeah.
about the retention plus growth equals
Yeah.
more revenues. And I just want to, this podcast works in this way. I put brilliant people on and I try to get the most advices from them, kind of a checklist. And then we try, like with my audience, to apply them and figure out if they really work, So I'm really keen now to kind of create a mental checklist with you of what works in terms of behaviors and what doesn't work in order to drive retention. More
Well,
revenues with retention plus growth.
yeah, yeah. So, all right. So that's the. So let's come back to okay. So retention, again, satisfaction, which you can measure through CSAT or customer satisfaction. You can measure through Net Promoter Scores, lots of different things, is a huge driver of retention. If you want to drive growth, and by the way, I got to be super clear here, Tobia, the growth I'm talking about is growth in an individual account. So from a CEO perspective, he or she will often say, as the ones I've known have said, if I could just drive my retention rate from, say, 80% to 82% and keep the hunting team active, we will grow as a company. So that is retention drives growth in the aggregate, where just higher retention will drive overall growth for the company. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, how do I drive growth in an individual opportunity or an individual account? How do I get this one account from 20 million to 25 million? And there, if you think about to do that, going back to the argument would be, you need to help find a way to get your customer not to embrace status quo. You got to get them to embrace change. And that's where I think, if I may, I come all the way back to all the stuff that's in the Challenger sale, the Challenger customer, because that, particularly the Challenger customer, which I'm proud of both books, but particularly maybe it's because it's the one that's less read, but the Challenger customer is the book I'm especially proud of. There's a lot of detail in there. It's kind of a step-by-step roadmap to how research works. And I think I haven't looked at it in a while. I think it's chapter 3. It might be chapter 4, but it starts with a very opening salvo of, look, we all sell the same thing. We all sell change. And it's a journey. It's a step-by-step recipe book on what does it mean to sell change and how do you get your customers to embrace change. And there's no better way for me to explain it than what's in the book, but I won't try to even recap it because it will get too long. But is that helping your customer understand new ways to operate, new ways to make money, to save money, to mitigate risk that they themselves, despite all of their work and all their work with you, haven't fully appreciated. Show them in this body of research, we call this customer improvement. The reason why we called it customer improvement is because effectively it's Challenger, but we shopped this idea of like, hey, we found out the best way to drive growth with existing customers is to use Challenger. And a couple heads of sales said, if you tell me that, I'm going to kill you because I'm so sick and tired of hearing about Challenger. So we gave it a new name. We called it customer improvement. And there were some reasons why, but customer improvement is help your customers understand ways they can improve their business, how they can perform more effectively, be more productive in ways they haven't fully appreciated. And part of that is showing them not just the potential benefit of change, but the cost of inaction. What is what we call this breaking down the A before you build up the B, and that's all laid out in the book. But I've got to help my understand in the way the team at ADP. Some of you will know ADP or Automatic Data Processing. It's a payroll company. This actually came from a different part of the company originally, but many years ago, the way they took this idea and ran with it was under the phrase, "We need to teach our customers that the pain of same is greater than the pain of change." And so this is where these two things work at cross purposes, because If I want to drive retention, I just want to be happy with the status quo. If I want to drive change, I actually have to break the status quo. I actually have to get them to realize the status quo is costing them money or exposing them to risk that they haven't fully appreciated. And it feels like a high wire act, because then I think, well, if I'm going to get them to move off of the status quo, but the status quo is buying from me, I potentially am undermining the likelihood that they're even going to stick around, let alone grow. And that's the challenge. That's why driving growth of existing customers is actually so incredibly hard, is because you're trying to solve for two things at the same time. You're trying to solve for driving growth, but not losing what you have already. So if you have a $20 million account, as I often told people, like, what's the one thing worse than failing to grow a $20 million account to $25 million? Well, the one thing worse than that is failing to keep the 20 million in the first place. And so we always solve for that first. We always solve for the status quo first. And that's when this body of research we did around Challenger and customer improvement was so interesting, because customer improvement was the only thing we could find in our research that drove retention and growth simultaneously. In other words, if I can be the person that sits down with my customer and shows them a new way to save money, to make money, to mitigate risk, help them improve their business, then what the customer realizes, wow, you know what? Working with this individual, working with Tobia, working with this company is amazing, because not only is he showing me things I could do to be better, but just this relationship we have is incredibly valuable. We need to keep that relationship and expand it over time. And to even to this day, I think a lot of the ideas in Challenger are still dramatically relevant for account growth in existing customers.
Coming back to your point, I also prefer the challenger customer. Like I think I'm like one of the few like that, because I mean the challenger set is really great, but the level of detail the challenger customer has, but not only the roadmaps, the even the pictures and stuff, everything is a
Yeah.
learning, is a massive learning experience, you know. And I also like that the challenger customer puts kind of between the lines, was kind of predictive about, you know, the risk of inaction. You just talked about the risk of inaction, and the challenger customer was the only one which, in an age of, you know, ROI justification, just mentioned that the risk of inaction cannot be calculated only with numbers, but
Yep.
especially with quality drivers, let's call them in this
Yep.
way. And nowadays this thing is way more relevant, because no one, sorry, like I'm a little bit extreme, but companies seems not to believe anymore to ROI analysis, because these are the numbers that we give them, when they seem to be way more open to evaluate the qualitative risk that they take if they don't do
Yep.
something, you know. And this was, and I was like at the beginning of my career at that time when I read the book, and then I said, wow, that is crazy. No one is believing in numbers, but everyone is believing fear. Let me put it in this way.
100%. That's exactly right. By the way, the breakdown video that came out, it's today. It's episode number 19. You can find on my LinkedIn profile. You can find on YouTube under Brent's Breakdown. But it's under the title of "What the heck" or "What in the world is value management," which is this world I live in today. Um, and it's a world, very briefly, Tobia, that I didn't really know much about. It's a whole subfunction. You remember like 8 years ago when no one had heard of customer success, and now today customer success is this incredibly important function. That's kind of where value management is right now. It is this exploding, rapidly exploding function or sub-function or team capability discipline that's going to become incredibly important over the coming years. And I lay out in today's videos of what exactly it is, how it works, why it's important. But it all comes back down to the very thing you're talking about, which is how do we sit down collaboratively with our customer? And before we build out an ROI calculator, or we build out a value calculator, whatever it is, let's sit down and have a conversation like, what are we even trying to do? And why is that important? Have we got alignment around it? What are the tactics we're going to? So what are the outcomes, the tactics, the metrics, the targets, the timelines? And getting alignment on all those things before we actually sit down and say, all right, here's how much we can make you or save you over time. And a lot of that, as you go through that process, you're going to find, to your point, is going to be qualitative, not quantitative. It's going to be non-monetizable factors that tend to get overlooked. And a lot of it's not going to be aligned across the stakeholder group because they have different criteria, different metrics that they're working against. So it's anyway, it's complicated stuff. Honestly, I deeply respect anyone who does sales. I'm a researcher. I'm not a sales guy, as I proved to our head of sales at Ecosystems the other day when I joined him on a sales call. Because here is my approach to sales. This is why I can't actually, the old saying, Toby, that those who can't do teach. That's like, sign me up. That's me. Because here's how I sell. I sell like this. Here's what I do. You like it? No? All right. You're dead to me. I'm moving on. I have no patience for sales, right? It's like, look, I think what I've got is amazing. If you don't agree with me, that's on you. That's not my problem. I'm going to go find someone who loves it because I ain't got time for this, right? And this is why I would never make goal and I could never succeed as a seller because I don't have the patience to. I could tell you how the story should unfold. I just don't have the patience to actually do it, which is ironic. I know, but this is how I present insight, right? It's the same things. Like we did research. We worked our asses off to find something we think is world class and something we believe in. We're proud of. Here it is. Take it or leave it. And that's a great way to do research. It's a great way to teach. It's a horrible way to sell.
Yeah, I mean, it's just two different jobs, like in research, you have a kind of clear result. You know what I mean? Like you proved
You do.
yourself that you're right. In sales, that is, we move into the kind of gray space between the decision and no decision, which for most of people can be like, can give anxiety, can be, can be tough to be there. And I don't
Yeah.
know if I don't remember if it was Jack Welch, but by the way, he said that only to, coming back even to value management, only to uh, departments, only two jobs cannot be really, let's say, calculated Six Sigma against. Let me put
Mm-hmm.
it in this way. And one
Mm-hmm.
was law, and the other one was sales, because they deal with the gray space between decision and no decision. And it is what it is. Coming back to the humanity and connectivity, we are who we are, and
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. It's super interesting, but the bottom line for this is our conversation today. As you think about if you're looking to drive growth with existing customers, I think you're right to try to do so. You're right to make that an objective. You're probably even right to say that it's probably easier or better or more likely to succeed than acquiring new customers altogether. I think we could debate that point, but it's probably an academic debate. But the point is, let's understand how the physics of growth with existing customers works because it doesn't work the way you might think. And there's these cross-cutting incentives of retention versus growth, of getting a customer to embrace status quo while simultaneously getting them to embrace change. It's actually complicated. And understanding how those physics works is going to significantly increase your likelihood of success.
that's a good one. Now I have just the last few questions, and I'm not
Yeah.
going to ask you about why you came up with the research of the challenges. I think that you answered 300 times, but I have just one question for both books.
Yeah.
What would you have done different?
Wow. I don't, you mean for like, I don't, nothing. And if that sounds arrogant, I don't mean it that way. It's like, look, I try to be very forgiving to myself, which is if at any given point in my life, I'm trying to make the best decision I can based on the inputs I have at the time, then I'm going to hopefully live a life with significantly less regret. Or, so I try not to go back and second guess what I would have done differently. It's like, I feel pretty confident that we wrote the best book we could at the time, given what we know, given the fact we'd never written a book before. It's had an incredible, incredible impact, which is, I mean this sincerely. It's so humbling. We would have never. I knew I knew it was good material. I did because I wouldn't have written a book if I didn't think it was good. This is another reason why I don't write a book today because I got good material, but I got to have great material. If I'm going to write a book, for me the bar is high. I want to fricking change the world. I want to poke the world in the eye. Otherwise, why do it, right? And those books were hit that bar. So, could I have made them shorter, packaged them differently? Maybe, but you know what? Life's too short. I stand by them. I'm proud of them. The fact that they've had an impact is incredibly gratifying. And I'm on to the next thing. I get bored easily. So, there you go.
That's
I
the
don't know. Is
researcher.
that a non-answer, man? Were you looking for a different answer? I don't know.
No, it's okay. I kind of my cousin is a researcher, not as you, but he works in the, let's see, aerospace and engineering stuff, and he gets bored easily too. As soon as he got the results, he has to jump on something else. And
Right.
I tell him, look,
Move on.
guys, come on, just
Yeah.
be quiet. I have just one really last question. Due to that,
Yeah.
everyone made money thanks to this book. Me too. And but you made less money than everyone else. The question is, was it worth the effort?
Yeah, 100%. Yes. So, but it raised my brand. It got me. Ultimately there was promotions because I could show impact to my job and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose technically there's money involved, but at the end of the day, this comes with age. I gave you a hard time about becoming an old man, right? So as maybe I'm older, wiser, and not to get super dark, because I don't think this is dark. It's just reality. We have a finite amount of time on this planet, and at some point, I'll be gone. And at some point, I'd like to know that at least while I'm here, if not after I'm gone, I had an impact. That this goes back to like people want to be seen. I'm no different. I'm a human too. People want to know that their life meant something, that they had an impact, that they and you know what, Tobia, that's the fact when people tell me this had an impact on them, a positive one. I'm the richest man in the world, and that's just truth. And so I say that with just incredibly deep humility, and I feel pretty good about it.
So, Brent, thank you for the answers and thank you for being here first. And
Oh
I
yeah,
really hope you will, I don't know, come over Italy or come again on the show whenever you want. I can show you around and be your cicerone. Let me put it in this way.
thanks, man. That would be awesome. I love your country, so hopefully someday soon I'll be back over.
Thank you so much.
All right, cheers, man.
Bye.